Thank you very much to Rhodes House. Thanks to Professor Kumar and the previous speaker, Professor Prochaska, for really excellent remarks. I think we could just stop now and take up those excellent questions and challenges that you've already raised. In this session, we face enormous questions. What's the role of universities in Africa and Asia? What are the current and future real needs, and how can that demand be met? What are the roles and responsibilities and relationships between world-class universities and their communities? What government policies encourage such institutions? For the next few minutes, I'm happy to bring some remarks to bear from my perspective. As well, I'll be joined by Professor Hasu Yu, a Pro-Vice Chancellor for Internationalization at University of Nottingham. Professor Yu is an engineer and originally from China. We're also joined by Professor Leonard Menshikov, who's Professor of Economics and Politics at Princeton University and is also the director of the African School of Economics based in Benin, Africa, from where he is from. My name is John Gaventa. I'm the Director of Research at the Institute of Development Studies at the University of Sussex. I was on one of the first organizing calls, made a few suggestions, and next thing I knew, I was here talking on topics out of my depth. But I'm sure that's true for many of us here. We really see there's so much experience in this room. We will move very quickly to more interactive sessions. So over the next 30 minutes, each of us will share some thoughts from different perspectives, different parts of the world, different disciplines to get us going. But then, as Alistair just said, we'll move very quickly to discussion groups so that each of you can pitch in on these really important questions. My own perspective, my own take is from that of my discipline, international development. While not an expert in the field of higher education, I've worked over the many years with a number of research institutions in Africa and Asia as a partner, especially through collaborative research partnerships. I was raised in a small village in West Africa, in Nigeria, and my father helped set up the first medical school there. And I think the interest in higher education in Africa and Asia is in our blood. So let me first of all begin by posing a few contextual paradoxes. First of all, while we're discussing contemporary challenges of world-class universities and beginning from a deficit model that asks the question, why don't we have more world-class institutions in Africa and Asia, let's also go back and remind ourselves that the first higher education institutions were founded in Africa and Asia. Both India and Pakistan were home to some of the world's earliest universities, dating back to 6th century BC, with several thousand residential students. And in Africa and Egypt, the Alexandria Museum and Library dates back to 3300 BC, as do Islamic learning institutions in Egypt and Morocco, who are the oldest continuously running higher education institutions in the world. So we're starting from continents who have a long interest in and long history of higher education that predates most of the institutions with which we are associated. Secondly, while we're concerned about the absence of world-class institutions in Africa and parts of Asia, as counted by global rankings, we mustn't lose sight that there are already a number of excellent institutions doing very innovative things. But by the official rankings in Asia, as has been pointed out, there are 17 top 100 universities, but these are concentrated in the most developed economies. So the reality of China, Hong Kong, Japan, Singapore, South Korea, Taiwan, where these universities are, is very different from the reality of India, which is very different from the poorer communities in Asia, be they in Bangladesh, Nepal, Myanmar, or Sri Lanka. Similarly, in Africa, while no institution ranks in the top 100 according to the official data, University of Cape Town, which we have Max Price here, is close to the top at 134. But 4 of the top 5 ranking universities in Africa are in South Africa, which is again a very different economic and social context than places like Nigeria, the DRC, Zimbabwe, or South Sudan. So we're talking about excellence, but also huge diversity within the sector of Asia and Africa across very differentiated economies, very differentiated social realities, very differentiated by rural, urban, etc., making any generalizations very difficult. Thirdly, we need to recognize that while access to higher education in these countries has soared in recent years, education has not been the panacea that we might have hoped for solving pressing social, economic, cultural, political problems. To give an example, in Africa, despite the fact that enrollments doubled in higher education between 2000 and 2010, doubled, still only 7% of the possible population of that age group is enrolled in higher education, compared to 29% worldwide, or 76%, over 75% in many Western countries. We've come a long way, but we have a long way to go. And greater education for these youth hasn't been a panacea. Despite greater educational access and despite economic growth in some African and Asian countries, inequality in these countries has also grown enormously. Gender disparities persist, particularly in higher education. Education itself has not become a conveyor belt to good jobs, in fact, leading to a situation in many countries where we now have highly educated young populations with rising expectations, but deep social and economic failures to meet those expectations. Egypt, where I've been doing some work over the last 2 or 3 years, is perhaps an example. 70% of the population is under 30, and the vast majority of these, about 70%, are unemployed, and yet many of these are highly educated with growing expectations politically, economically, and yet they haven't had their expectations met. So it's in this context that African and Asian universities face huge competing expectations, which have been outlined so well by our previous speakers. On the one hand, there's the narrative of globalization, rapid economic growth, requiring first-class, world-class institutions which can compete on a global stage. On the other hand, there's the increasing hope and pressure that universities can focus on meeting the social, human capital, democratic, and economic needs of their own societies, such that global recognition, as we currently measure it, in itself becomes a weak measure for success if the expectation is to meet those local and domestic needs, as Alice so well pointed out. Now, I hesitated to use this example because it's perhaps controversial, but since the previous speaker raised it, I want to just mention the example of the Rhodes statue, the controversies surrounding the Rhodes statue at the University of Cape Town. Perhaps this reflects the tension. On the one hand, we have at the University of Cape Town, and Max Price, who's here, knows much more, we have the top university by global standards in Africa, and yet we also have challenges being raised by the domestic populace and by the students of the lack of diversity in the student body, the lack of diversity in the faculty, the failure of curriculums to meet local needs. And as the Minister of Education said after the statue was moved, he says, it's important for our higher education institutions to note that transformation goes far beyond this, that is, the relatively cosmetic movement of a statue. It should include changing the demographic composition of staff and student bodies, as well as ensuring that curriculum reflects South Africa's development and cultural needs. It should reflect the history of its people, including all their languages, art, philosophical and religious beliefs, and their material and scientific development. And so we have a tension between, on the one hand, meeting some global and universal expectations required by a global, increasingly globalized economy, and the demand, on the other hand, to meet local needs and realities. Now, as we debate these critical issues in Rhodes House, perhaps, as has already been alluded to, it's important to realize that while Cecil Rhodes valued education, he also valued service. Those of us who are here as Rhodes Scholars were chosen not only for our alleged intellectual contribution, but also for our leadership and our commitment to service. So perhaps it is in this spirit we can draw the same metrics for higher education in Africa and Asia and ask what role they play in serving the development of their own societies and the communities within them. Now, I'm conscious that to raise this question may immediately raise the charge of a double standard. Why should we say that since most world-class institutions, as currently measured, are based in the global north, why shouldn't we support Southern universities to do the same? It's a fair question, but one to which I want to immediately respond. First of all, we have to recognize that universities, and some of the best universities in other parts of the world, have in fact also played an important role in strengthening their local communities and societies historically. Look at the land-grant college university movement in the United States. Second, as Alice has already said, we increasingly face across the world the challenges of the impact agenda, which are saying that in times of scarce funding for higher education, it's not enough to produce knowledge for its own sake, but we have to ask the questions about the impact of that knowledge on our societies. And finally, I want to suggest, though, that to be world-class and to serve one's society are not, in fact, mutually exclusive. In fact, knowledge excellence and excellence in social engagement may go together. Our own institution, the Institute of Development Studies, as part of University of Sussex, recently was cited in the QS rankings as being #1 in our field, development studies, in the world. And we focus now deliberately not on what we call research excellence, but what we call engaged excellence, trying to combine excellence in research with excellence in societal engagement. And that's the metric that we want to define for ourselves, while we also try to hold on to this coveted #1 ranking. Now, as we look to the future in Africa and Asia, we face huge challenges. We're likely to see a growing emphasis on the role of higher education as drivers for human, social, and economic development. For many years, for many development organizations, higher education hasn't been high on the agenda for the last 20 years. The Millennium Development Goals chose to focus, perhaps appropriately, on primary and secondary education, particularly for women and girls. When that happened some 15 years ago, funding flows from the World Bank and other institutions to higher education in Africa virtually dried up. But now, with more and more students graduating from secondary education, the focus now shifts to higher education. The new social development goals, which hopefully will be adopted later this year, actually for the first time focus as well on primary and secondary education, on tertiary education, arguing in SDG 4 that we shall strive to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning for all, and goes on to talk about the responsibility of governments to ensure equal access for all men and women to affordable, quality, technical, vocational, tertiary education, including university education. Every government who signs up to the SDGs later this year will now have the responsibility to develop policies and programs to try to meet that SDG goal. Now, these growing expectations produce huge challenges for these universities, challenges which in the first instance may not reflect the focus on becoming world-class research institutions. I'm running out of time, but let me just name 3 very quick challenges. First is the access challenge. While enrollment has grown enormously, the emphasis on secondary education and other demographics in the last few years has produced a huge youth bulge in many of these countries. In this context, demand for higher education is expected to grow. In sub-Saharan Africa alone, the 18 to 23-year-old age group is expected to grow by more than 50% in the next 15 years. Though not quite as high, Asia faces similar double-digit projections. With a greater young population that is also keen on higher education, there will be huge challenges for African and Asian universities simply to keep up with demand. Secondly, there's the quality challenge. Closely related to this is the challenge of how one teaches, how one does research, and having necessary resources and skills and human capital to do so. Already, classrooms in Africa are 50% greater than global averages. The brain drain has robbed the continent of some of its best talent. Those who do return from overseas training to teach back in their home countries face huge challenges. Recently, I was teaching a research methods class to a group of faculty at a very interesting place called the University of Development Studies in northern Ghana, and I was delighted to meet a graduate from there here this morning. University of Development Studies was set up by the University by Ghana some 20 years ago to serve the poorest communities in northern Ghana. They're very poor in that part of the world, with a particular mandate to link its research and teaching to social development. I gave what I thought was my best shot at how we do training for research methods, how we help faculty become and students become really world-class researchers. And in the end, I had a question from a young faculty member. She was from the area. She had gone to the United States. She had received her PhD. She had come back. She's teaching. She's the only female PhD in that entire part of northern Ghana. And she said, "That's great, Dr. Gaventa. All the classes methods you've talked about require discussion and participatory pedagogies and all this kind of thing. Let me show you where I teach." She took me to a large open-air shed, and she said, I teach here with one microphone with 1,000 students, and that's my honors class. So the challenges of quality of infrastructure facing young academics are huge. And the third challenge, therefore, is the research and relevance challenge. While our colleagues like this face the challenges of how to teach and meet this increasing demand, on the one hand, on the other hand, they're also required to publish globally, and to meet local needs. In this environment, several new things are beginning to happen, and I hope we can point to them. In India, as Professor Kumar would know, the new 5-year plan warns of isolation of the higher education institutions and requires them to think about how they link more deliberately to their local social responsibilities and produce relevant research. In many countries across Africa, with these new demands, and there are also accompanied by new innovations, very exciting innovations. So as we discuss how we move forward to create world-class research institutions, I think we need to start with the recognition that this isn't a blank slate. Some very exciting things are happening internally. The challenge isn't only about how to compete with other world-class institutions to lead on research rankings. It's about how to set new standards and practices for how universities serve the development of their own societies through research, education, and outreach. Dr. Kumar talked about a new imagination for research for universities in Africa and Asia. And my own belief is that the universities of the future in these countries will not simply replicate the standards of world-class excellence, they will in fact define new standards from which all of us can learn. Thank you. Let me turn to the next section.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As John said, my name is Hai Sui Yu. I'm a professor in civil engineering, but for the last 4 years I've been spending most of my time working as a Pro-Vice-Chancellor for International at the University of Nottingham. So it's my great pleasure to be here this morning to engage with you, to learn from you. So if I may, because the title or topic is very big here in terms of needs and context for world-class research institutions in Africa and Asia. I have talked to John, so I'll probably focus on issues in Asia in particular. So I think we're talking about the value of HE institutions. They are so enduring. For example, this university, Oxford University, dates back to 1096. So they have been around for a long time. And if you compare with some of the big companies, they probably only last for 50 years, or very few will last for 100 years. But why Oxford and other universities can last for 900 years? So there must be good values they provide for the societies, for the communities, isn't it? So not just economic, I think, but if we just focus on the key role of HE sector, and certainly human capital is very, very important for economic growth, and HE is play a key role there in terms of the core business is teaching and learning, education, and to provide skilled workforce, so that's very, very important, but also to produce, I think, good citizens, personal development as well, that's important. Research, I mean, we're talking about world-class research institutions, so I think research is a very important element of that, creation of new knowledge, but also impact to economic impact and also other business impact. So I think that's applied research. So if you're talking about fundamental research, but also applied and translational research. So there's more focus nowadays on that. And also apart from economic impact, but also HE creates social capital, so that's also very, very important for social improvement. So I think that there are a lot of enduring value of HE sector, which we need to be aware of. For research-intensive university, the focus is, I think they can do more in terms of research and also KE element. Innovation is very, very important. Obviously, universities play a key role because they got a lot of talent in the universities. They got good infrastructure to be able to be used to work for innovation and support innovation. but also international connections and partnership. That's very, very important. So on that point, if you look at international mobile students over the last 40 years, actually 40 years ago, there were only 500,000 students studying abroad or overseas, but now it's 10 times. So at the moment, it's about 5 million. So if you look at over the last 15 years, increase from 2.1 million probably to 5 million. So that's a significant increase. That's the trend which helped, I think, the university to develop across all continents. But if you look at that internationally mobile students, there's an imbalance because if you look at taking those countries who are sending students, most of them are actually sent by like Asia, in China, India, South Korea, and so on. So they actually don't take many at the moment. But I think there's a potential, certain ambition over the next 10 or 15 years. They have ambition to take more international students. And so those countries who taking more is like US, UK, Australia, and Germany, and France, and so on. So there's a imbalance there. But I think that probably will be adjusted over the next 10 to 15 years. Also, another trend is over the last 10 to 15 years, there's been more international branch campuses. Okay, so that's very important. And at the moment, there are about 230 probably. Some of them are very small. Nottingham University got two very big ones. One in Malaysia, we have over 5,000 students. We were the first UK university to open a campus in Malaysia. In China, we were the first foreign university to open a campus in China in 2004. We have over 6,000 students there. But I think most of them, half of them are in Middle East, but I think more now in Asia in terms of these international HE hubs like Malaysia, Hong Kong, China, Singapore. India, they're thinking about that as well, trying to attract foreign providers to go there. So I think that will help the local HE sector to reform as well, I think. So if you look at the research articles, of course, I think in terms of volume, countries in Asia, they produce awful lot. But I think in terms of percentage of internationally collaborative articles, they are less. So I will show you later on. But in terms of economic growth over the next 15 years, and probably 22% are coming from China, 9% from India, the rest of Asia probably contribute to 10%. So that's more than 40% of the growth will be coming from countries in Asia. So I think that will certainly generate need for world-class research university to help the innovation agenda, to transform the economy from a labor-intensive to a knowledge-based economy. So I think that's the need you can see. In terms of expenditure, so the government is certainly putting a lot of money to support R&D. If you look at China and South Korea, certainly big increase every year, actually. Research output already said, if you look at the volume, it's a huge increase for China and India as well. But I think the issues or challenge is really to focus on the quality. So that's the citations. If you look at that, I think because internationally joint publications tend to get more citations, so they have more impact. So if you look at the percentage, in the UK, I think it's about 45% of our articles are jointly internationally produced. In China, it's less than 20%. So I think that's the gap. So I think over the next 10 or 15 years, or India is the same. So I think they need to increase that percentage. So that's, if you look at some of the top Chinese institutions in terms of international collaborations, they tend to be around 20% or below, okay? So final slides basic to look at the ranking, but there are so many world university rankings. But I think the trend, if you just look at QS top 100 universities, Asia certainly 2004, there were 12 universities in the top 100. 8 years later, it was 19. I guess the trend probably is the same for all other rankings as well. So I think over the next 20 or 30 years, I'm pretty sure they have more universities in the top 100, whatever scheme you're using. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. We'll move on to Professor Menshikov.
Yes. So my name is Leonard. My name is Leonard Menshikov. I'm a professor at Princeton University, New Jersey, and I'm the founder of African School of Economics. I'll be talking mostly about, actually exclusively about Africa, and I'll be talking about the area that I know the best, which is social science, economics in particular, and I'll try to be as provocative as possible, because I think there are a lot of misconceptions about research in Africa. So let me start with some fact, some introductory fact. No university, very few universities in Africa are among the top 500, that's for sure. Universities in Africa are not in good shape. That's a fact as well. But at the same time, some of the top scholarship in economics are on Africa. So Esther Duflo, Michael Kremer from MIT and Harvard, who are at the top in terms of academic research, actually work on Kenya, South Africa, particularly Kenya. So now scholars, some of the world top academics today are Africans, and many of them are not from South Africa, which is actually good news, because we tend to assume that everything happening in Africa is happening in South Africa. So one of the world top engineers teaches at Caltech. He's from Nigeria. The world top anthropologist and philosopher, Kwame Appiah, he's from Ghana. Historians, Lamin Sane from Gambia, teaches at Yale, and Diouf, and Abdoulaye Diagne from Senegal, teach at Columbia, and the top African mathematicians, Wilfred Gambo from UCLA, he's from Benin, and so on and so forth. So this has implications for policy on higher education in Africa, because it shows that you can actually build around what works. You can not only work, meaning the scholarship, but also the scholars who are, on Africa. Now, one of my favorite stories about higher education in Africa is the following. I grew up in central Benin, in a very poor farming village of about 300 people. Growing up, we have 50 kids on my generation. Today, 11 of us have PhDs. 11 out of 50 have PhDs. So I should say, as a result of this, the primary school enrollment rate in my village in the 60s were 93%, while in other areas, not far from where we are, was 20 or 15%. So there are a lot of lessons that can be learned from this. So let me now get into the issues that we need to address here. So obviously, why we need research universities, because we need, there is growing prosperity, economic prosperity in Africa. So we need managers. We need well-trained managers. Many international corporations complain that, well, we don't have local talent, and because the local talent are trained at MIT, the top African talents are trained at MIT and Harvard and Chicago, so you need to train them locally. So, and this cannot be done by having top MBA program within Africa. So we need competent and knowledgeable policymakers, because there is a big revolution in impact evaluation. So for instance, you need policymakers to not only implement policies, but to be able to evaluate its impact. And this takes training. And this cannot be done abroad, it has to be done domestically. So we need also to generate knowledge, because Africa is very, very complex. Africa is extremely complex. And the history has been written mostly by non-Africans, and Africans actually don't have a good sense of who they are. They don't have a good sense of where they are going. So academics has a big role to play. Okay? Unfortunately, most of the top African scholars are teaching and doing research abroad. Or as I mentioned earlier, all the top scholarships on Africa are done by non-Africans, individuals who come and stay for a few months and for a few weeks, and then, collect data and publish on Africa. So we need to actually be able to create domestic institutions that actually generate the knowledge, obviously in collaboration with universities abroad. So now how this could be done? So I'll focus on 2 points, the supply side and the demand side. So first on the supply side. So I'm not going to be elaborating way too much. I think this has been done earlier. I think the big gap is on research method. Like if I take economics in particular, so today economics is very rigorous, very quantitative, very analytical. So, but then if we look carefully, you have if you look at the young African academics, there are two types. Some who are very knowledgeable about the economy of their country, who cannot really do it rigorously because they are not trained in statistics and research method. Or you have some Africans who have background in mathematics, in statistics, coming mostly from Francophone countries, who have no idea about the reality of Africa. So there must be a way to bring those two groups together so that we can actually talk about Africa, talk about what they know. I mean, those who have the method can have more knowledge about the reality. Those who have the knowledge will have more skills to be able to do it properly. So research method is critical. Now, the second point on how to achieve this is liberal arts approach to education at all levels. For me, I think that in every single graduate program, every single honorary graduate program, you need to teach history. You need to teach African history, you need to teach anthropology, you need to teach ethnography, so that you know who you are, you know where you come from, I mean, when I talk to young Africans, they obviously, they know celebrities like Nelson Mandela, they know, but then when you go a little bit further down, they have no idea, And for instance, there are values, there are norms on African, in African societies that are not properly studied because, we didn't take them seriously. For instance, one of the things that I realized is that, in Benin and many parts of Africa, even rural communities, people who have absolute rural community who are very poor, they are profoundly liberal. The degree of tolerance is just incredible. And then you know about it by listening to songs, by see how people relate to each other, So, I mean, like, in my village, sorry, I'll be talking a lot about that place. So, I mean, I was growing up in the 60s. I know two people from my generation who were gay. Two in a village of 300 people who were openly gay. People let them live their lives. So this is not what you expect rural Africa to be. So, but then if you are born and raised after 60, you follow the script that, everything in Africa is dictatorships, oppression, women's, inequity and all that. But I'm not saying this is not the reality, but if you know Africa deep enough, you take time to know those communities, you'll develop a sense that there are values that you care about that are not modern. They are traditional values. So that's quite important. Now, the third point on how is on institutions and incentives. I mean, the reason why research declined in African universities because there are not enough incentives, to get faculty to do research. I have a friend from Brazil who teaches at PUC. He told me that you can get your annual salary at that university in Brazil by publishing in a top 5 journal. So finding a way to pay an annual salary to a faculty, I think is not that difficult, but the reward is huge. You have somebody from a small university in Brazil who can actually publish in American Economic Review. So what I'm saying is that incentives can be put in place to achieve that. But at my university, the African School of Economics, and this is the website, I have a slogan that I tell all my faculty. I told them when they started complaining about internet, I say Einstein didn't have access to internet. So that 90% of the Nobel Prize winners did not use internet. Okay, so as a way to say no excuse about infrastructure, no excuse about poverty and all that, just go out and do the work. Especially in social science, in mathematics, you just need a pen and pencil, and you are going ahead. So the thing about it is that there is too much excuse. Why things are not going in Benin? Oh, of course, they don't have money. Why things are not going well in universities in Nigeria? Of course, they don't have this. Of course, they don't have that. Tell them about the village, central Benin, who have 11 PhDs. If you see the picture, we were basically taking classes more or less outside. So, which means that institutions' incentives matter. Now, I have a few minutes left, but then let me talk about the demand side. So it's about higher education. It's not just what you give, it's what people want. It's about raising aspirations. I can tell you that the reason why I'm here today, is not because I was blessed with growing up in a rich and wealthy country, because when I was growing up, the Dean of Cardinals from Vatican, I'm not saying just a cardinal, the Dean of Cardinals from Vatican, Cardinal Gantin, he come from my village. So when you grow up near something like that, Princeton is nothing, right? So it's critical to think about aspirations and to get people to want to do research. So we also have to focus on value and value-seeking education to get people to say that schooling, higher education is not just about getting a degree, it's about accountability, learning to cooperate, caring about the environment where you live. So how do you do this? We can hopefully talk about it during the session. So I have 2 minutes left, or one, if
you need to wind up, yeah.
Okay. So in terms of responsibilities and the role of governments, I think I can say a couple of things. We have to do applied research. We have to engage with government. We have to engage with civil society. And at the African School of Economics, that's what we do. In terms of the role of the government is to allow competition and private institutions, is to learn from what I just said and say, take the superstar, build around them, and take focus on areas where your country is very, very well. I mean, in Benin, we are very good in mathematics. So create a research center in mathematics. Senegal, they are very good in history. So try to build world-class institutions in history. Nigeria, engineering, so that if we look at Pan-African level, we can federate all those research centers and excellence so that, in fact, as a whole, African can benefit from that. Thank you very much.